At a family meeting, Mom leaned back in her chair, smiling wide. She clinked her glass and said loudly, "Your sister finally got the perfect house." Everyone clapped, everyone cheered, and all eyes went straight to Ardan, my younger sister. She gave a little wave like she was some kind of celebrity. I just sat there with a smile on my face, holding my tongue. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Now, my name is Lena. I'm in my mid-30s, not the loud type, not the kind who needs the spotlight. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who works hard, pays the bills, and keeps her head down. Ardan is the opposite. She's younger, flashier, and Mom's golden child. If Ardan sneezes, Mom will brag about how ladylike it sounded. If Ardan fails, somehow it turns into a story about her being brave for trying. And when Ardan succeeds, well, you better believe the entire family will hear about it 10 times over. That night, sitting around the table, the spotlight on Ardan was blinding. Cousins leaned in to hear her talk about crown molding and marble counters. Aunt Denise was nearly fanning herself, saying, "A perfect house at her age. Ardan, you're just amazing." Even Dad, who usually stays quiet, muttered something about how proud he was. And me? I just smiled. Not because I was happy for her, though that's what everyone thought, but because I knew the truth. That house, that so-called dream Ardan bought, wasn't hers to brag about. It was supposed to be mine. I had found it first. I'd spent months searching, scrimping, planning. I'd worked double shifts and said no to vacations just to get my savings together. When I came across that little Victorian home with the peeling paint and sagging porch, I saw more than broken boards. I saw potential. A place that could be mine, that I could fix with my own 2 hands. I remember showing Ardan pictures on my phone, my heart racing with excitement. She leaned over, smiled, and said, "Wow, that really does look like you." At the time, I believed her. I thought she was sharing in my joy. I didn't know she was filing away every detail, getting ready to stab me in the back. So when Mom raised her glass that night to toast Ardan's perfect house, I kept quiet. I didn't tell anyone how I'd stood in that same living room weeks earlier, imagining where I'd put my furniture. I didn't tell anyone how Ardan beat me to the offer by just days, or how she twisted the story so the family believed I was never serious about buying. I just smiled, because sometimes silence cuts deeper than words. For years, I carried a quiet dream inside me. To have a place that was mine, a home I could build a life in. That dream didn't come easy. I worked days at a small clinic and nights at a diner, juggling schedules, pushing through exhaustion, tucking away every dollar I could. My friends spent weekends traveling or shopping. I spent mine poring over listings, calculating numbers, and hoping that one day, something would finally line up. Then it happened. One afternoon, after a long shift, I drove past a weathered Victorian on a corner lot. Its paint was faded, shutters hung crooked, and the porch sagged, but to me it looked like possibility. The price wasn't out of reach. It wasn't shiny or new, but it spoke to me. I parked out front, sat there for a long time, and imagined how it could look once repaired. A fresh coat of paint. Flowers in the yard. Light spilling from the windows at night. For the first time, I could see my future not just in numbers, but in walls and wood and soil. I couldn't keep the excitement inside. At the next family dinner, I shared the news. My voice shook when I explained how long I'd been saving, and how I thought this was the chance I'd been waiting for. I described the tall windows, the wraparound porch, the creaky charm of it. Everyone listened politely, but Ardan's face lit up in a way I didn't expect. She leaned over to see the photos I had pulled up on my phone. "Wow," she said, her tone bright. "That's so you." I took it as encouragement. My heart swelled because for once, it felt like she was on my side. She asked questions. How much was it listed for? How big was the yard? What school district it was in? I answered eagerly, never once thinking there was any reason to guard my excitement. She even suggested paint colors, tossing out the idea of pale blue shutters. I laughed, relieved to have her interest, because sharing the dream made it feel even more real. Weeks went by. I stayed in touch with the realtor, carefully sorting through my finances, trying to make sure everything would line up. It was stressful, but I told myself the struggle would be worth it. Then one morning I got a call. The realtor's voice was apologetic, hesitant. "I'm so sorry, Lena. The property's already under contract." My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even had a chance to submit the final paperwork. Later, the truth came out in the ugliest way. Ardan had gone behind me and made an offer first. The same sister who smiled at the photos, who talked about shutters and flower beds, had quietly swept the house out from under me. In that moment, my dream didn't just collapse. It felt stolen. When the news spread through the family, it didn't come from me. Ardan was the one who made the announcement. She stood in the center of the living room, voice loud and proud, telling everyone she had closed on a property. People gathered around her, clapping her on the back, asking questions, offering congratulations. I listened from the corner, expecting at least a nod in my direction, some acknowledgement that I had been the one dreaming of that place. But instead, her words turned sharp. She told them I had looked at the same house, but wasn't in a position to commit. According to her, I had dragged my feet, never ready to sign papers, never serious enough to follow through. The way she said it was casual, almost kind, as if she were explaining a simple fact. But the undertone was there, thick and unmistakable. She painted me as someone who talks big and acts small. Someone who wastes time. Someone who can't handle responsibility. Mom was quick to agree. That's the difference, she said, squeezing Ardan's hand. One of you goes after things, the other hesitates. Ardan, I'm proud of you for making bold choices. Dad added his own comment, nodding slowly, as though Ardan had proved herself wiser. It's good to see someone young take ownership, not just dream about it. The room filled with praise, with relatives chiming in about how rare it was for someone her age to have that kind of determination. They called her practical, ambitious, mature. All the things I had worked for years to embody, reduced to dust with a single story told from her lips. I sat still, my jaw tight, a polite expression frozen on my face. Inside, though, my chest burned. I wasn't just hurt by the lie. It was the ease with which she delivered it, the way she tilted the narrative so smoothly that no one thought to question it. She had listened to me describe my dream, watched me light up, and then stepped into my place as if it had always belonged to her. And when she told the story, she left me out entirely, except as a footnote, a cautionary tale of someone who wasn't brave enough to act. I thought about all the years I had worked, all the hours spent in uniforms and late shifts, all the times I had told myself it would pay off. And now, in front of the people whose approval I had always quietly craved, my efforts were dismissed like a joke. It wasn't just a loss. It was betrayal. The kind that doesn't come from a stranger, but from someone who knows your heart, someone you trust enough to hand over your joy. That was the knife. And she didn't just stab once, she twisted. After Ardan secured the place, I tried to bring up what had happened. I thought maybe if I explained myself, someone would understand. I sat with Mom at the kitchen table one evening, the air thick with the smell of coffee. My voice shook as I told her how wrong it felt, how everything about the way Ardan swooped in was unfair. She didn't even look up from stirring her cup. It's just a house, Lena, she said flatly. Don't be bitter. Your time will come. The words sank into me like stones. Just a house. She knew how long I'd been working for it, how much it meant. But she brushed it off like I was a child sulking over a toy. I tried again another day, this time when Dad was around. I spoke carefully, pointing out how fast Ardan had acted after hearing me talk about the place. He exchanged a look with Mom and sighed. Let it go. She made her move. You can't hold that against her forever. So that became the story. To them, I wasn't wronged. I was overreacting. The more I tried to explain, the more they painted me as jealous. Eventually, I learned to stop mentioning it altogether. Ardan, of course, knew exactly what she had done. Around relatives, she put on a sugary act, hugging me tight and saying things like, Lena will get hers soon. She's so smart and hardworking. Everyone smiled at the performance, thinking she was the model sister. But when no one else was looking, her mask slipped. One afternoon, I found myself alone with her in the driveway. She leaned against her car, arms folded, a smirk tugging at her lips. You'll find another, she said quietly, almost like a taunt. That one was too good for you anyway. The words burned worse than anything Mom or Dad had said. They didn't know the truth. Ardan did. And she enjoyed it. I walked away before I could say something I'd regret. My fists ached from how hard I was clenching them, but I didn't let her see. She wanted me to break, to lash out, to give her the satisfaction of being the calm one while I looked irrational. I refused to hand that to her. So I swallowed it all. The anger, the hurt, the hollow feeling every time I drove past the street where that house stood. I pushed it down, storing it somewhere deep, where she couldn't see it or use it against me. But silence doesn't mean surrender. While they told me to wait my turn, and while she smirked like a queen on a throne, I began sketching something else in my mind. Not a new house. Not a fresh dream. Something sharper. I started planning. Almost a year passed before Ardan finally settled into her new place. She threw herself a housewarming, of course. White balloons on the mailbox, twinkle lights strung across the porch, champagne glasses lined up on a folding table. Everyone arrived with gifts, plants, wine bottles, kitchen gadgets. She walked them through each room like a proud realtor, pointing out crown molding and polished wood floors. That was only the beginning. Every few weeks after, she hosted something new. Wine tastings, brunches, little garden parties. The house became her stage, and she was determined to make sure every relative and friend saw it. Mom gushed at every event, telling guests how remarkable it was that her youngest had landed such a gem. Ardan soaked it all up, her smile wide, her voice high with excitement. I attended, quiet as ever, watching more than speaking. From the outside, it all looked flawless. But I started noticing things others didn't. One evening, as people sipped rose on the porch, I heard water dripping inside. Later, while helping clear dishes, I spotted a bucket tucked under the kitchen sink, catching a steady leak. Ardan waved it off with a laugh. Old houses, right? Gives them character. Another time, she bragged about the new chandelier she'd ordered, but when she flipped the switch, half the lights flickered. The wiring behind the walls buzzed faintly, a sound most people ignored. I didn't. On a quiet visit, when the crowd wasn't around, I saw the real problem. In the basement, the floor slanted ever so slightly, water stains creeping up the edges of the foundation. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was damp, crumbling at the corners. That kind of issue didn't fix itself. It spread, slow and relentless. Still, Ardan never admitted anything was wrong. When relatives asked, she boasted about upgrades she had planned. Granite counters. French doors. A fresh coat of paint for the porch. She painted a picture of luxury, covering the cracks with bright words and practiced smiles. But beneath it all, I recognized the strain. Her laugh grew sharper, her tone clipped whenever costs came up. She complained about contractors, about delays, about how no one worked hard enough. The shine in her voice dulled, though she tried to hide it. I saw it in her hands, too. Perfectly manicured nails chipped at the edges, cuticles ragged. I noticed the stack of unopened bills by the entry table, envelopes shoved under glossy magazines. At gatherings, she brushed off any mention of money, changing the subject quickly, but her eyes betrayed her. The house that once stood as her triumph was slowly eating away at her. And as I sat in her parlor, sipping from a glass she pressed into my hand, I realized something. She wasn't living in a dream. She was sinking inside a burden too heavy to carry. Back when I first chased the property, I spent a lot of time with the man who owned it. His name was Mr. Harlan, an older fellow with calloused hands and a soft drawl that carried years of hard work. He had built much of that house with his own labor, sanded beams, laid tile, patched walls. Every corner carried his touch. During the bidding process, I visited him several times. We sat on his porch with mugs of coffee, talking about everything from wood grain to family. He told me about winters when the pipes rattled, about long afternoons spent fixing the roof, about the satisfaction of turning a worn place into something solid. I listened carefully, grateful for the knowledge and for the warmth he showed me. He seemed pleased that I cared about the details, that I respected the sweat that had gone into it. When Ardan cut her deal, she barely spoke with him. From what I heard later, she criticized his choices, dismissing his taste as outdated. She made a comment about how he hadn't kept up with trends, and it stung him more than he admitted at the time. He signed the papers, but the regret lingered. Months later, after she had already moved in, I ran into him at the grocery store. He recognized me right away, gave me a nod, and asked how things had turned out. When I explained that Ardan had ended up with the place, his mouth tightened. I should have known, he muttered. Didn't feel right, letting it go to someone who didn't appreciate it. That day, he invited me over to his new place, smaller and simpler but full of charm. Over iced tea at his kitchen table, he opened up. You were the one who should have had it, he said. Not her. I could see how much you cared. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Truth is, that house isn't as clean as it looks on paper. There's baggage tied to the land. Court filings, back taxes. Things she probably doesn't even know. I kept every document in a box, just in case. I sat still, hardly breathing. He continued, explaining how disputes over property lines had dragged through the county office for years. Some neighbors claimed portions of the yard, and nothing had ever been properly resolved. Add to that stacks of unpaid taxes, fines that could snowball if not addressed. He admitted he hadn't disclosed everything because the sale moved too quickly, and Ardan hadn't asked enough questions. She was dazzled by appearances, too eager to sign. "I'll tell you this, Lena," he said firmly. "A house like that can bleed someone dry if they're not careful. She may think she won, but trouble's coming." I left with a weighty silence inside me, his words echoing. The house she had stolen wasn't the treasure she believed. It was a trap. After that talk with Mr. Harlan, I couldn't let it go. His warning gnawed at me, louder with each passing day. I told myself to leave it alone, but curiosity has a way of pulling threads you can't ignore. One evening, I drove to his place again, and he met me at the door with a cardboard box. "Here," he said, handing it over. "This is everything I've got on that property. Do with it what you think is right." I carried the box home and set it on my kitchen table. Inside were thick folders, brittle receipts, and photocopied letters from county clerks. Old maps. Handwritten notes. Some pages smelled of dust and ink, like they had been sitting untouched for decades. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. There were tax bills with balances carried over, some small, some alarmingly large. Notices of hearings that had been postponed, disputes over where the boundary line ended. None of it had ever been settled cleanly. Ardan's name wasn't on half the forms it should have been. That discovery pushed me further. The next morning, I took a trip downtown, walking into the county office with a calm face and a steady voice. I requested records, asked for copies, sifted through stacks of files until my hands were smudged with ink. The clerks didn't look twice. Paperwork is paperwork, after all. By the end of the week, I had a thick binder of evidence. Buried in all those pages was one crucial fact. The title transfer hadn't been filed correctly. Ardan had skipped steps, probably out of arrogance or ignorance. She thought signing a check made her queen of the castle. She had no idea the crown sat loose on her head. If I wanted, I could challenge it. The law would back me. On paper, she was standing on shaky ground, and one push could topple the whole thing. I sat in my living room at night, lamp casting a small pool of light, flipping through the documents again and again. Each line I read made my pulse steadier, not wilder. This wasn't just about a house anymore. That ship had sailed. I didn't want those walls or that porch. What I wanted was balance. She had stolen something precious, then smeared my name to make her theft look righteous. She had let everyone see me as weak, indecisive, unworthy. And she had smiled while doing it. Now, I held the proof that everything she paraded in front of them rested on a fault line. All it would take was one move from me, and the ground beneath her would crack. I closed the binder, pressing my hand flat against the cover. It felt cold, solid. I didn't crave ownership. I craved justice. Or maybe it was something sharper, retribution. Either way, she was going to taste what I had been forced to swallow. The next family dinner was held at my parents' place, the table crowded with dishes and voices overlapping in cheerful noise. Ardan, as usual, claimed the spotlight. She had barely set her fork down before launching into another story about her remodel. "This contractor wanted to charge me double for the new staircase," she said with a dramatic roll of her eyes. "I told him I don't settle for lazy work. You should have seen his face when I threatened to bring in someone else." Everyone laughed, charmed by her performance. Mom clapped her hands together and said, "You always know how to handle people. That's why everything turns out perfect for you." Ardan smiled sweetly, leaning back in her chair like a queen surveying her court. I sat across from her, silent, my hands folded in my lap. I had promised myself I would wait for the right moment, and now it was here. "Funny thing about that house," I said, my voice steady but louder than usual. The chatter died down, heads turning toward me. "You don't really own it." The room froze. For a second, Ardan looked confused, then broke into a laugh. "Oh, Lena. Still hung up on that. That's sad." I didn't laugh. Instead, I reached down beside my chair and pulled out a neat stack of papers, clipped together, thick with stamps and signatures. I slid them across the table toward her. Her smile faltered as she glanced down. She didn't reach for them right away. The silence stretched until Dad, curious, leaned over to take a look. His brow furrowed almost immediately. Mom's jaw slackened as she scanned the top page. "What is this?" she asked, voice thinner than usual. Ardan finally snatched the documents, flipping through them quickly. I watched the color drain from her face as she read the lines, missing filings, unresolved claims, unpaid balances. Her fingers trembled just slightly, the corners of the papers bending under her grip. "You're lying," she said at last, but her voice cracked. "No," I answered calm as stone. "That's the county's word, not mine. You skipped steps. You ignored notices. And unless you fix it, the place you keep parading around isn't really yours." Dad sat back in his chair, staring at her with a hard expression I hadn't seen in years. Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. Cousins and aunts shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Ardan tried to laugh again, but the sound was hollow. This is nothing. I'll handle it." I leaned forward slightly. "Handle it then. But don't pretend it's all perfect anymore. You built your pedestal on sand." Her face went pale, the smug glow gone. For once, she had no clever reply. The papers sat in front of her, heavy as a verdict. The silence around the table was louder than any applause she had ever received. The weeks that followed that dinner unraveled quickly for Ardan. Letters started arriving, thick envelopes stamped with county seals and legal warnings. What she once dismissed as minor paperwork turned into notices demanding payment. Taxes long ignored swelled with penalties. Court hearings were scheduled. Deadlines closed in on her faster than she could shuffle them aside. Contractors she bragged about suddenly stopped returning her calls. Bills stacked up on her kitchen counter, each one heavier than the last. She tried to juggle them, tried to hide the panic behind her usual confident smile, but cracks spread through her performance faster than she could plaster over them. Eventually, she came to me. I was in my living room when she appeared at the door, hair unkempt, eyes rimmed red, her usual polish gone. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "I can't handle this alone. You're good with paperwork, with numbers. Help me fix this. You're my sister." For a long moment, I just stared at her. The desperation in her face might have moved me once. But I thought back to the day she had leaned close, smirking, telling me the house was too good for me. I remembered the way she spun lies that painted me as careless, how she basked in applause while I sat silent, branded as unworthy. "I was your sister," I said quietly, "when I showed you that house. Remember?" The words landed like a slap. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to find a way back into the role she always played, but the script had vanished. She left without another word. From there, things only worsened for her. Court rulings went against her. The tax office demanded some she couldn't produce. She tried taking loans, but the repairs on the house had already drained her. The staircase she boasted about fixing collapsed halfway through renovations. Mold crept into the basement walls. Even her garden, once carefully staged for parties, grew wild with weeds. What she had once flaunted as her crown jewel became a burden she couldn't lift. Neighbors whispered about how quickly her fortune had turned. Relatives stopped asking for tours or praising her choices. The admiration dried up, replaced with awkward silences whenever her name came up. I drove by the place sometimes, not out of longing but observation. Curtains stayed drawn. A for sale sign appeared, then disappeared after months without offers. The house sagged more each time I passed, as if sharing her exhaustion. She had wanted a symbol of triumph, something to shine above everyone else. Instead, she found herself trapped in a crumbling shell, the very walls she stole now pressing in on her. Her pedestal had collapsed, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. Months rolled by before the family gathered again. This time, it wasn't at Ardan's place. No strings of lights or trays of wine glasses waiting on a porch. We met at my parents' house, where the air carried the smell of roast chicken and baked rolls. The usual chatter filled the room, but one thing was noticeably absent. Nobody asked about Ardan's house. She sat at the far end of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, her usual shine dimmed. The confident voice that once filled every silence was reduced to short replies. When someone asked about work, she forced a smile and muttered something vague. No one pressed further. The silence around her spoke louder than any applause she had once collected. Mom, ever the peacemaker, tried to steer conversation away from anything that might touch a sore spot. She brought up recipes, garden tools, neighborhood gossip. Every subject was safer than the one looming over us, the house that had turned from centerpiece to cautionary tale. When someone hinted at real estate, Mom quickly cut in, changing the topic to weather. Her discomfort was plain, a tightness around her eyes, the faintest strain in her laugh. I sat near the middle of the table, eating quietly, watching it all unfold. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The weight of what Ardan had done, and what it had cost her, hung in the air without me saying a word. Ardan kept her gaze low, fork moving food around her plate more than lifting it to her mouth. For years, she had basked in the glow of being the favorite, the one Mom praised above all else. Now, she was just another presence at the table, stripped of her throne. For the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me. Not the raw ache of loss. Not the sting of betrayal. Something lighter, calmer. I realized I didn't envy her anymore. I didn't even want what she had once taken. Because now I saw it clearly. It had never been a prize. It had been a burden disguised as victory. And she had carried it until it broke her down. So I sat there, a small smile curling at the edges of my mouth. It wasn't smugness. It wasn't triumph. It was the quiet satisfaction of balance restored. She had learned the hard way that actions come back around. Mom avoided my eyes, maybe remembering how she had brushed me off, how she had told me not to be bitter. Dad stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on his plate. No one defended Ardan anymore. I leaned back slightly, letting the voices blur around me, and a single thought settled in my mind like a final note closing a song. Sometimes revenge isn't taking what they stole from you. It's letting them choke on it. Do you think I made the right choice by letting Ardan face the fallout, or should I have stepped in to help her? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.